easier for me to sort which class is what. I have to stop and see what kind of material they go into, that kind of a thing. All right. Participant. Admit all. Admit all. Spotlight me. All right. So, Crim Long. We had just finished up with property statutes. Let's see what's next. Let's see here. Fraud against elderly. Larcenies, different states. State. Yeah, we talked about all that stuff. Cool. And over here to Blackboard, criminal law. Let's see if that one was 7. We have now moved into 8. Public order and decency. Crimes against the public. Back to that one. We'll grab this right here. Boop. And enable editing. And this one. I don't know if we need that one. All right, so we're going to move the Zoom thing to the back so I can see it. Turn on chat. Apparently didn't let this person in. Let's let them in. And make this a little bit bigger. All right, so as we get started with this lesson, so we're moving to an interesting phrase. A little tongue-tied today. No sleep last night. When you look at the title for the sections, public order, public decency. So the big phrase here is public, but we'll also focus a little bit on order here for decency to some degree. As we start dealing with more people are rolling in. I like that. Okay. Admit all. Good. I'll wait for them to connect. All right. So let's see here. Public order. Okay. Where do I want to start? There's a few places to start with this one. So in terms of options, there's a few different. The one that I'd really like to start with for this one, because it's relatively neutral. When I say relatively neutral, some of these approaches for this one aren't necessarily neutral. And I don't mean from like a political standpoint. I mean from like a malevolence again. It's that malevolence at last. Well, I guess it was last time to some degree it's across all your classes. Probably the most interesting thing, really just dial it way back out. You know, if you're delving into these classes, you're delving into whether it's policing, courts, corrections, whether it's the criminology side. You get a lot of very specific, very refined information, very distinct, able to use literally to distinguish things from one another. But at the end of the day, you also have to kind of dial it way back out to the simple understanding of things, good and evil kind of thing. That's where that malevolence comes in. And with our field, it's particularly interesting because if you look at all the opportunities there, that's something else coming down. Them in. Give them a second. I can't see where they went. Right there. Looks like they connected. Let's roll through here real quick. Yep. Okay, good. And so as we're talking about, it's like the end of the day kind of thing, the good and evil. So this is something where it's like you can get in terms of good and evil, condemnation for the use of some of these things. This is one where you get into it pretty easily, pretty quickly. But when you dial it back into it, or I should dial it out, look at it at the end of the day, the abstract kind of thing, good versus evil. Our field, no matter what area you go into, it's like the limits here for both of these things, extreme, right? If you look at the last 200 years of any group of people, law enforcement, and I'm going to focus on this one for a second. How many people have done absolutely horrible, horrible, horrible things through these types of positions, through these processes? Like, yeah, you'll never find any other time worse in history than, or any other place than where you start to get into these areas. At the same time, you'll never find anything that's more beautiful, right? Nothing that's more good, more beneficial. And there'll be people who you can kind of point to and identify, okay, that's a good person. Usually it's how the thing works. I mean, idea for person would be like John Best that started probation, what he did there, apprenticeships. You start taking personal responsibility for juveniles who are criminals, kind of thing. And basically, we're going to be off to the early grave kind of thing. And so you get both of these things here. But the most interesting thing with it is where you get to see things kind of flip around a little bit. What do I mean by that? Where you get to see things that should be harmful used for good purposes. That's even better, right? Because you can then, if you do it right, you've got good coming out of the good and good coming out of the bad. Or you can have those who say they're doing something good and really what they're doing is something evil, right? This is that threshold right here where it's this is what we're talking about for this area, for this subject, because here what we're talking about is, well, we're regulating order and decency, right? If I gave it a very oppressive and intimidating name, and put it into a division and said, we're just going to manage this thing right here, how terrifying would that be? Decency? I said, Ministry of Decency, something like that. That starts getting really scary, doesn't it? Or doesn't it? You don't know? Ooh, that's kind of frightening. Okay. You'll see this all over the place. It's like the, I can't remember if I mentioned it in here, juvenile justice system. The reason why juveniles don't have the same rights as adults is because the system's there to benefit kids, right? So we deprive you of your rights for your benefit. If I'm really worried about getting in your house, whether or not I've got reason to be in there, but I've got a criminal reason I want to go in there, find out your crime, but I've got no justification for it. If I can find a reason to go in there to help somebody, I can walk right up in there without going through the formal paperwork, right? Working those things, you have to be very, very careful with, because you can very, very easily do something evil on either side. This one, we have to start out with a conversation about what it is. Say what it is. This one. What does that word mean? When you see that word public, what are we talking about here? You tell me. Ooh, they're going to tell me. Who's this? Here's. That's right. It's over here. I don't have 2 screens, or I have 3 screens. Yes. Give me the simple. Go ahead and give me the simple. Because what will happen is as we do this, you'll start to see the kind of threads, themes, kind of thing that emerge from it. When we talk about public, what are we talking about? Don't make me start telling bad jokes. I'm going to start telling bad jokes. I'll do it. I'm going to start with Ron White. I'm not joking. I really will. Okay, we're gonna go with the wrong way. I'll give you guys 10 more seconds. See if it pops up anything.
I would say like for the people. Like I want to say like owned by the government, but that doesn't really make sense.
People. Yeah. There's some relationship associated with that. Yes. Yes. Okay. What else? Do I start back over at 10 or do I pick up right now? Pick up right across 3.
Now I'm curious about the Ron White.
Yeah, yeah. It's not really that bad. It's actually pretty fun. So Ron White, he's basically I don't know if he still is, but decades an alcoholic kind of thing. I mean, comedian, you're traveling on the road. Of course, you're socializing, alcoholism, heavy drinking, that kind of thing. And so he's got a joke where starts out, he's in a bar and he's drinking heavily. As he's drinking heavily, apparently he, I remember correctly, it gets close to the end of the bar and then they stop serving. He's not too happy about that. So the bouncers come in, toss him out, and when the police show up, they're like, well, we're going to charge you with public intoxication. I had no intention of being intoxicated in public. I'm being intoxicated in the bar. They threw me out into public. Do you have that on? What is that? Be thrown into it? It's not like a pool. What does that mean?
I guess you could say property.
Property's gonna be. Yes. You have public properties. Yeah. Think about the opposite of that. Won't tell you what happened. I'm just saying. There are some stores I'm not allowed in anymore. What are we talking about? So the opposite of this thing right here. Public is indecent. What is that? What is that?
Not right.
Yeah, it could be anything from you got a streaker running through the mall. It could be anything from that to public urination to what? Right? You got a whole wide range of things here that can fall into that. Why is it we regulate that stuff? Is it criminal to go urinate? Maybe I'm just taking this here. I don't know. It was a bad joke. I like that. Yeah. Seriously, that's not something wrong to do in certain conditions. That's perfectly okay. Why would it be something we can't do in some situations?
Depends if you're being seen or not, I guess, by people.
Ooh.
Because like you're on like a trail in the mountains, like no one's gonna stop you. But
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
like city, someone's like, hey,
Yeah. Okay. So funny story. Let's see what we missed.
Oh, no.
This has been a few weeks back. What is it? J.D. Nichols Nature Preserve. Does that sound familiar to anybody? I got a
It's
couple
here.
people yesterday. Yeah, so it's not too far from town. It's like really pretty close, but it takes forever to drive out there because of the nice windy roads. Good place to go and take a walk. Again, that's a little trail up through these hills and such. One of the last times we went, kids are in tow. We're up on top of this great big hill, nice wooded area. Gotta go to the bathroom. Okay, what are we talking about here? Not number one. Okay, what are we gonna do here? Can you hold? No, you can't hold it. What are we gonna do here? Literally, yeah, one of those types of situations. So what do? Luckily, you know, baby, those you got baby wives and all that. So yeah. I guess go over there. What do with the mess? I guess just leave it. Take it with you. I don't want it. Right? Ooh. But some of that stuff's not going to necessarily be stuff that's biodegradable. As we're walking out, we get a little further down the trail. We're about 1/4 of the way from the exit. And here comes some guy. Yeah, we're going to go and do the cleanup kind of thing. What just happened there? Why are they going to go do cleanup? How do they know? Trail cams, right? Might be trail cams out there. Yeah. Because they left a bag of crap out there. Next thing you know, they're going off to go get it. Yeah, probably trail cams out there. That'd be really wise. Don't know for certain, but there's a big bag of crap out there somewhere, and somebody's going to go find it and get it. Why is it he didn't get? Should he get in trouble? No one's necessarily. It's on camera though. That reminds me of a bad joke I heard. Actually, it was a meme. One of my sons sent me where it was farmer driving around. He's like, yeah, the little thing. He's like driving his tractor. He's like, I just had to go to the bathroom. I took out. It's like I've been driving this combine all day. Get back in the combine and start rolling. I realize that's my neighbor's property. He has a trail cam pointed right where I just went and did that. That's all on film, buddy. I am so sorry. Right? But that one's fun. Most of the time. Why? Winston, what situations would it be where we wouldn't let that same behavior slide?
In school, at school.
Yes. Yes. So, we'll have fun with this one. Ooh, let me down. Sound go. I want to mute you for a second. There we go. And that person's got sound going too. If you guys want to talk, go ahead and unmute it. But by default, I'm sure. So you we'll say 4th grade. Still a little young. What would that be? About 9, 10 years old, right? Not the stage where you see the juvenile delinquency, that kind of stuff, where you can run into the opposition of defiance kind of stuff, where there's problems. You're trying to correct their behavior, and instead of them, raising their hand, go, can I go use the restroom? They get up, they walk over, they drop a trowel, they take one right in that trash can right there. It's like, what's going to happen there?
I'm probably gonna get called.
The phrase adding insult to injury, but it's more the other way around, right? That kid's gonna get in trouble. Somebody's gonna do something somewhere at some point in time. If not, parents are gonna feel. That we're an adult, what's gonna happen there? You're over in this territory. So we've got this aspect of seen and unseen. So we've got that element of privacy is involved. We have this element of, I guess you'd say, aggregate group behaviors, group things, community, a group. You have people involved. I don't tend to think of them in groups. I tend to think of them in individuals. You put them in groups, but individuals, you got groups at many different levels. You have places and property involved. Regulatory system, and whether or not you're being seen. If you're not seen, is it still a crime? I always thought that it wasn't seen, it was still criminal, and it was ethically immoral. That kind of realize that's at the threshold we're kind of at with this kind of stuff. Very, very, very low level behaviors that you start to use for the system. So in some ways, this is the lowest resolution kind of thing, the least serious of offenses. In some ways, it's the highest resolution, because you have to know exactly where these lines are drawn because of what you can do to people. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned a little bit about like the government thing. It's like, I don't think I've seen any books mention this, but I've heard this phrase come up in the last, couple decades or so, that'd be the one, femicide. Um, that's one where it's like, we talk about homicide, suicide. Femicide's where it's governmental bodies killing people. That number is gonna be the highest in history. Like, when you look at that, you'd have to include wars. That's that. You'd also have to include, genocides and things like that. So like, ooh, that number's huge. Huge, right? Biggest threat there in all of humanity's history, right there. So that's what we're dealing with here. Why is it we're dealing with it on this side and not when it comes to things like your more serious crimes? Because this is the lowest threshold it takes to get you into the system. It's the lowest things, right? You thought it was bad before, where it's here's the line for violent crime. That's the line right there at physical contact. Not even the sound it made if the mic picked that up. That, right? It's this. This one's even more sensitive. Okay. How is it so? Read that out loud. Yeah. What does that mean? It has to mean something. It's all over the place. Every time you see that word, it's really interesting in our field, that positive and negative thing. Because you always have to keep an eye on that. Always. That's kind of the way I cover people's true intents and stuff. You'll see it. It'll be buried underneath things, but it's there. This one. You will see that phrase associated with government almost, let's say unilaterally, across the board. Usually when I put that one up there, most people think China. They're not the only ones that have done that phrase. Yeah, they're not. Technically, we say the same thing. Right? People's Republic of China. We the people of these United States, the Republic. So we're talking the same thing. Is it the same thing? Yes, no, maybe. I really can't tell. And this is one. Whose? Whose people? Whose people are we talking about? One. This is where you get to start deciding. Who are our outcasts? Who are our vagrants? Who are the people we want to isolate? Who are the people we want to set on a path where it's very difficult to redeem oneself? This stuff's important. But it said the People's Republic of China would be the people. It's easier to see when you look at other people. Plus, the ranges of behaviors are different. Here, if you look at, what was it? History, current times, that kind of thing. You can find very easily groups of people who their government do not recognize their full range of rights. Here we watched for that. Historically, though, we have the same problem. Same problem. How do we address it? We don't know. What do I mean by that? We'll get into that in a second. Realize that threshold right there starts right here. Who do we recognize as people? Who do we not? You can see that kind of lesson echoed across your class, across the entire discipline. And we start getting into like the sociological side of things, they even do this in like methodology, some degree, the agreement reality kind of thing, where it's for something to truly exist, multiple people have to recognize it as existing kind of thing. In our field, the sense of community, what it is to be the people is one that's very, 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 very important. I can show you, maybe I'll do that some point in time, where you've got PhDs in this field who were saying something to the effect of, if a community is rallying against any particular group of people, that they should be allowed to do so. So you should be able to rally large numbers of people to move against others. Okay, what are we doing there? We're determining who's who, what's what, and who has control again, who needs to be outcast. Like that's really, really dangerous problem. Represents a huge change in our society. It's in the spirit of our society. That's why you always hear that phrase, our poor are tired of hungry masses, right? Because it doesn't matter where they're coming from, it's the same group of people. Right? But it's something very, very difficult, and that applies to most people at some point in time. What's really, really interesting to see is to see that element really hasn't changed, right? If you look at that poor, you're tired, you're hungry masses, you look at those who are being outcasted at any one point in time, you're going to deal with those who have problems, that kind of thing. Maybe it's with this, maybe it's with that. How do we deal with it? Do we want to banish them from society? Because you can do that, right? Vagrancy laws, things of that nature. We'll get into that. You can't be here. You can't loiter here. We don't want you to exist in these spaces for any longer than you have to. You need to make sure that you're transient and movable, so you can't set up anywhere. If you set up somewhere, you have some type of stability here. We don't like that. You need to get the hell out of here. Right? It's an eyesore. Got it, right? Christian meeting. Looks real nice. That whole thing about being seen versus unseen. You're not done anything with the problem, you're just shifting it around. The flip side, what society tried in the last decade? What would I say? You have things like this. And this is just one example of some of the more minor stuff. Depending on how bad the homeless situation is in areas. You have a huge problem with this one, the decency thing. People have to go to the bathroom. These people have no homes, no place to go to the bathroom. Where they go? Just where they're at. So, with the number we have, we can crack down on it, clean the streets, take a whole bunch of people who are already vulnerable, already problems, already, you can say problems, they have problems, they can be classified as problems themselves. Some people do. When you look at it, you have a very vulnerable population who's, some of them are already dying, will die, and you're going to move them now? More are probably going to die. Who's going to bear that responsibility? You didn't put them there, but you're moving them. Do you care? Well, if you look at it from the right perspective, you don't at all, because you hate them. They're not people anymore. That's what happens there. Who's recognized as people at all? Right? That's how quickly it goes. You can see this over and over and over again. This is why all of our processes here with the criminal stuff has things like change of venue and things like that. So that way you can try to address this to some degree, but realize that's also part of this too, the overall society. We don't run it right. This word doesn't mean anything but this. This is an indication for power. It's just like that thing we're doing, was it next week? Or is it the week thereafter? I need to look it up. I don't remember. The voting thing. You go in and you vote, you get a count. That's a show of force. How many people agree with what ideas? And can we determine which way's up? That's really hard, actually. I don't. But this thing right here. You need to realize that all their power comes from here. And then think back to the 1960s. I can tell you, decency, public order, you get some of these group behaviors, riots and things of that nature. It's like 1960s was interesting because there was a bit, you'd have the violence there, but some of it wasn't like what you see riots today. Probably one of the things that's been on my mind as of late is Kent State. If I said Kent State, how many of you recognize that phrase? Okay, you should look it up. 1960s, Kent State was one of the first universities to take, was it Black people? As a result, public outcry, some people in support of allowing Blacks into college, some not. The military shows up to deal with the situation, and some people die. People at your age didn't, right? Come on. Go to this thing. How do we want to look at one another? It's very, very, very interesting. The way people responded back in that generation. It's like I like to highlight that one because it's one that's particularly important. You guys ever heard the phrase flower power? Ooh, I haven't, have you? Oh, have you? Okay, so that's a lesson as well as in the last couple generations. 1960s flower power refers to basically the fact that these peace-loving, long-haired hippies didn't want to do anything. Like you can't really do damn thing, right? It's hard getting to just get up off there. One of the things that's happening is they're having loaded rifles pointed at their heads. Here's a flower, asshole. It's not a flower. Love you. All this power comes from this right here. So long as people know where those lines are drawn and they won't draw them in that way. None of that shit ever happens. But you have to remember those lessons. You have to keep those things in mind and always be assessing yourself. If you're not assessing yourself in those types of situations, this goes off the rails. And that whole lesson is not that old. 1960s flower power. If I said Jim Morrison, you know who that is, Mr. Mojo Riza. You recognize that, but not flower power. Why is that? That's interesting to me. It's peace. They don't want you to have it. Why is that? I don't know. Those of power will use this term to make you feel like you're not. Then they'll identify people to make not. Then they'll take the people who have to enforce those rules and they'll take their humanity too. If you're not familiar with that, that's what is it? Ordinary Men. It's a guy's name Browning. I want to say the last name is Browning. Ordinary Men. That's Nazi police battalion. Regular police members who then started getting orders for people on trains. You get to see how they're slow walk into it. And here's how formal, how orderly it is, and that kind of stuff, and all the records. Yeah, and so it's like you got that kind of stuff going on. What are the grounds that they started putting people on trains as well? And all kinds. What does it end up being? Reasons to be on the train. And I've been hearing a lot about trains in politics. I don't like trains. I literally don't like trains because anytime you start dealing with that group thing, that's what you're doing here again. It's like, why does that matter? Why can't we just discuss ideas? People can't in society. I don't know why. This, though, is where that line starts to get drawn. It is very simple behaviors, but what it is it's How do we ourselves want to hold each other accountable to some degree? And how is it those who inhabit these positions want to hold us accountable? Those in these positions have some degree of power. They're the ones who actually read it. They're the ones with the actual power. They're the ones who actually control that. They're the ones who determine what takes place. Right? If I said, issues in society that are bigger scope, have really weird signals. Self-immolation. Right? You guys seen any of that in the last couple of years? I actually have here in this country, where people would set themselves on fire related to political issues. The only time I'd ever seen anything related to that was the Burning Monk. I actually can't remember where that even was now because there's been so many other things going on. But that basically what you had there was this thing coming to take over. No. Really, really weird stuff. And so it's stuff we have to watch really, really closely. And you'll see as we start moving to the specific statutes, how that works. Anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so. I think we'll start with that now. Let's see here. Share screen. That is the correct one. So crimes against public order, public decency. What is it to be decent? What is it to be orderly? How is it we recognize these things? How is it we regulate them? First one starts with peace, right? Breach of the peace. Willfully committed acts that serves public tranquility or order and for which there is no legal justification. Okay? How do we recognize what's justifiable? How do we recognize what's acceptable and what's not? This one you start talking about sound levels. How many people are called to complain? That kind of thing. Or how frequently someone can call to complain. If someone's annoying enough, if you complain enough, can you get someone to move? It's that phrase, squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's this thing, right? What was it? I think I maybe in your last class, it's like talking about HOAs. Like those things are always fun to me. Never lived in one. Just the thought of it, I'm going to regulate my neighbors on top of everything else to increase my own home value. It's like these abuses already. You're gonna add in another level right there. It's like, ooh, that's gonna be rough. All right. Gross injuries, grossly disturbing the peace, and then loud or unusual noises, and then language. Right. Every person willfully wrongly commits an act that grossly injures the person, property of another, disturbs the peace, held openly outrages public decency, including not limited to urination in public place, is injurious to public morals. Although no punishment is expressly prescribed therefore for this code, the person is guilty of a misdemeanor. Right? Next one. Willfully maliciously disturb either day or night, peace, quiet of any city of first city, village, all the way down to individual, by loud, unusual noise, abusive, violent, profane language, party, so disturbing, some other person threatened, shooting off firearms, brandishing, speeding around the streets, fined a sum not to exceed $100, imprisonment not to exceed 30 days in jail. Right. So those are your thresholds there. You can actually be put in jail for that. That's interesting. Who's going to be put in jail for something like that? That's someone who couldn't pay the fine. So last time I talked a little about that when we were talking about property crimes. Realize that anytime you start dealing with this system, to some degree, we talk about at the beginning, it's like you deal with lawyers, the types of counsel that you get. If you're going with your own counsel, it's going to be a different level than public defender just because the sheer amount of work that's stacked up between the two. One's quantity, the other one is not, that kind of a thing. And so you want the one that's not doing a whole bunch of quantity. Here, these punishments, it's like you can forego those money. It's retired. But if you have money, you won't be the one to get it in the first place. And fighting words. So this is where we start moving into some of that incitation stuff. You can cause people to take actions. You can have, there's reasonable cause for things. I don't know if I want to get into that one just yet. I want to get into the riot stuff, the group stuff, because that's going to type a little bit better. Let's go ahead and go down. See. Use of language calculated to arouse anger, cause breach of peace. So basically, insults, profane, violent words, that kind of thing. Again, you're still talking that same $100, 30 days in jail. Oop, too far. All right. Disorderly conduct, vagrancy, and loitering. So these ones I mentioned earlier. So we'll start with loitering. What is it to loiter? We'll start with vagrant. If someone is a vagrant, what are they? See, people who wander about from place to place without visible means of support, refusing to work even though able to do so, and living off the charity of others. That's what I put there. So people who are unstable, I guess, in whatever way. That would include multiple domains, right? Anything from monetary to social to psychological to physical to any number of reasons. Loitering is how we handle it now. It has to do with basically hanging around in certain places, businesses, things like that. We'll look at the statute in a second. You hang around too long. How long's too long? Not going to be specific time there. If you're there to conduct business, they don't want you to go anywhere. They want you there. So if I have 50 cents, $1.50, how much time is that worth? Ooh, right? The value we place on people, how we value people. This is one of those things right there. You can see the value of that figure attached. Interestingly, right here, this one, disorderly conduct. What is that? Drunkenness, fighting, disturbing the peace, shock the morality of its population, that kind of thing. When are you going to get hit with that? Think about the situations when those arise. Okay, here's what it talks about alcohol. I'm going to skip over that for now. Unlawful assembly. Yeah, we'll come back to the alcohol stuff because that's more substance stuff. I'll get more back into that. So here's where you get the big one. Unlawful assembly, riot, and rout. Realize all three of those things are basically the same thing. It's just how far in the process did you get, right? Meeting of 3 or more persons to disturb the police, intention to participate in forceful, violent execution of unlawful enterprise, route, taking steps to carry out such a plan. Riot, actually doing it. Assembling is just the meeting to discuss it. Right? You're meeting to disturb the peace, yes. Okay. So how do we determine when something disturbs the peace or not? What? Because if that's the threshold for determining this, what's your purpose here? Intention, forcible, violent execution, unlawful enterprise, or a lawful enterprise in an unauthorized manner, disturbing the peace, unauthorized. What does unauthorized mean? Meeting of three or more persons. Meeting. How does one recognize, how does one determine whether or not that they have authority to meet?
Well, isn't it one of their constitutional rights to be able to assemble?
It is. It is. Okay,
So they, I guess they don't really need a reason if they believe it's true.
that's true, but how do we determine whether or not someone's authorized to do so? Authority. That's something that's there's a process involved with that. You have to get approval for if you're going to have a any type of group activities, that kind of stuff, that's sizable. Basically what starts looking at is if you're going to do if we're going to have whether it's what word I'm looking for. Good golly. Demonstrators, that's the word I'm looking for. Group of demonstrators over here. So how many demonstrators do you need before you have to go through this official process? Right? If I go, is it illegal for me to go stand out on the street corner and hold a sign? Trouble one there. Yeah. Okay. Once there's two other people want to stand on the same street corner and hold a sign. Okay. Any of us okay, now it's 50. Any of us fill this stuff out? Who was planning this? Is anyone planning this or just something just happened? Wait a second. So I have to regulate my actions because someone else might do something and be in the same place related to the same topic. And if none of us fill this out on what? Now it's technically unauthorized. Okay, so that doesn't quite work. So if we're dealing with full on riot, how would we handle that? Is it a full on riot? This is one of the ones where you can kind of look at the stuff that's been happening in the last, what would you say, like 5 years or so. Let me see, I can't remember time multiple time. And then go back to like the 90s. You look at the Rodney King riots. Those were riots like really bad. Some places here in the last few years had real riots. That distinction between riots, protests, assembly, whatever, it's like most of those things are violent because every time you get people together, what this thing right here, we functionally have to handle it. How would you handle it? You've got groups of people, handfuls of officers, that kind of a thing. What kinds of abilities would you want them to have? What kinds of behaviors would you want them to do, and what's physically possible? Is there a divergence in group sizes? One group bigger or smaller than the other? What happens is it's just one person they're really upset with. What's the easiest thing to do there? You got a large group of people and one target. We're gonna take the target. Right? That's actually what happens a lot of times when you start looking at those things over the last few years. You'll see that it's like homeowner, they'll actually remove them from the scene. Safer for them. It is. But also they're the ones who might usually have right to be where they're at, while that big group of people doesn't. It's just, can they move that big group of people? Do they want to go through that kind of an effort? Will they? And realize that if they choose not to, then they're going to take off the person who has that right to be where they're at, say they're in their own home or in their own yard. What does that mean? Well, the next thing you would do is if you've got a group of people you're going to, I don't know, I guess step on. The next thing you do is you start charging criminal activities, right? That's the next threshold. So it becomes no longer is it about this, it's about that numbers game. Whose people are we recognizing? This is one we can actually carve out and say that's an enemy. Ooh, that's even better. We'll do that all the time. No, not good. What will happen here? You moved right back into picking which people. Yes. You pit the numbers against the individual. That's the ultimate thing in our field. Every single level. It's like you have that good and evil that pervades all things. This field, you also have the many and the few. Right? Really, the individual. As we're dealing with this stuff, you're dealing maybe with a whole group of people. Maybe you're dealing with one. Right? And you've got to balance it out. Whether it's on the legislative side and addressing the statutes themselves, whether it's on the application side, policing, courts correcting, any of those things. Balancing those things out is the most important thing. Don't. You end up letting large groups of people dictate who is not one of them. You look at the word the people, and look, you have this lesson and all of it go. The most interesting phrase about it, aside from the fact it's tied to governmental power, is if you look at the languages across the world and the words that people have used to identify themselves, two patterns can they come up a lot. One, groups of people will name themselves after the region that they're in, some physical characteristics about it, something like that. Two, they'll use their native language for the word people. Why is that? Because they are a people. I mean, they're human. The rest of you are enemies, potentially. You're dangerous. That's what that word does. Who's a person, who isn't, who's a danger here. I recognize you as human. I recognize these people as not. I have no problem dealing with those who are not. That's what it does. So be aware of it. Don't follow that pathway, but be aware that it's there in people. With that, you guys have a great day. We'll pick up with more statutes on Monday. Have a good one.